Testing. 1, 2, 3. Welcome. Thank you for joining us. This is the Backlook Cinema Podcast. I am your host, Zo. That's Z-O or Z-O if you're outside the U.S. This is our 56th episode. Thank you for downloading and listening. We really appreciate it. The reason we started this show was to strengthen the bond between my son Zach and me, Zoe. We watched movies that I loved when I was growing up in the 70s, 80s, and 90s. And while Zach isn't a part of the recording right now, we did watch a classic movie yesterday. Now, if you like this show, then rate and review us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Spotchaser.com, or your favorite podcast app. Give us those 5 stars. We really appreciate it. And now, please follow us on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. You can find the details in the show notes. And please check out our website at backlookcinema.com. So, what have I been up to? What have I been doing lately? What's been going on in my life? What have I been watching and whatnot? So, not much, really. Still watching The Book of Boba Fett, Peacemaker, and Cowboy Bebop, the anime and the live action version. I just saw a couple of my favorite episodes of Cowboy Bebop. So they're starting to warm up to me. Like I said earlier, I'm not as enamored with Cowboy Bebop as a lot of other fans, or as I might have been had I watched it when this show first premiered in 1996. But really, it was these last couple episodes were really catchy. And also I'm trying to catch up on Blackish, Mixes, and Brooklyn Nine-Nine. These are in their final season, so I want to watch them and basically clear my slate of my favorite shows so I can move on to other shows that I've been meaning to catch up on. Like, I had been watching Battlestar Galactica, the Ron Moore remake, and I had kind of fell off, so I want to get back on there. I want to get back on what was that one that I had watched? It was the show about the devil, Lucifer, the show about the devil, Lucifer. I kind of fell off of that, and I want to get back to that show. And I hadn't watched it in a while, so I want to get back to that. And that's basically it. Just I hadn't really done anything much out of I visit some family and stuff like that, life stuff, but not really done a whole bunch of stuff. So, without further ado, let's get into today's movie. Me and Zach Zach, by the way, he had tested negative on a coronavirus on a home test. So we think that he's over it. So we were together unmasked in the house. So we believe he's well. He's feeling well. He tested negative. He's going to be all right. So we didn't have to watch it separately. We watched this movie together in the living room like we usually do. So the movie that we had watched was Close Encounters of the Third Kind. This movie is about Roy Neary. He's an Indiana electric lineman, finds his quiet and ordinary daily life turned upside down after a close encounter with a UFO, spurring him to an obsessed cross-country quest for answers as a momentous event approaches. So this was written by IMDb. I don't know exactly who the author is. And that's a pretty close approximation. Although I do think that they kind of left out that this is like a 2-part story, or it's basically 2 stories that converge into one. So one is about Roy Neary, an electric lineman. And there's also like a sub story where there's a woman, and Ronnie. No, that's not her name. Julian Goulier, and she's on a quest to find answers too. Basically, she's just trying to control her son. And then the other main story is a scientist who is finding strange clues in the desert, and he's trying to trace the clues to their inevitable conclusion, which ends up in Wyoming. So, you are thinking, is this a sequel? Like, why is it Close Encounters of the Third Kind? What happened to Close Encounters of the First Kind? And where is Close Encounters to the second time? You should be wondering this, because that is what I wondered when I was first obsessed with this movie. So it's all in the tagline and in the trailers. And I somehow missed that. But then again, I was around 7 or 8 at the time, so of course I would miss it. This is from the tagline, Close Encounters of the First Kind, sighting of the UFO. So there are a lot of real life close encounters of the first kind. You just see it. See strange lights in the sky, flies by you. First encounter. The close encounter of the second kind is physical evidence. So the UFO affected you in some way, or, they dropped something. There is a piece of physical evidence that is the close encounter of the second kind. Close encounter of the third kind. Contact. We are not alone. That's basically the tagline. And obviously the third kind is when you actually have at least communication with the UFO. This movie was released on December 14th, 1977 by Julia Phillips and Michael Phillips Production and EMI Films. It grossed over $135 million in the US and Canada and a $306 million worldwide on a $20 million budget. Now that is, and it got great reviews. I don't know. I keep forgetting to add that part, but yes, it got rave reviews, as a matter of fact. So this movie is starring Richard Dreyfuss as Roy Neary, and we've seen him in What About Bob, Jaws, American Graffiti, and a bunch of other classics. We have Francois Truffaut. I think that's how you say his name. And he plays Claude Lacombe. He's been in The Wild Card, Day for Night, and the movie Breathless, the American movie Breathless, is based on his story, Abode des Soufflés. I think that's how you say that. It was in French. He's a French actor. He's apparently a well-renowned French actor. They kind of went out of their way to get this man to appear in Close Encounters. So, and he was really good in this movie. He has an interesting technique for acting. I'm forgetting. I'm getting ahead of myself. Also, we have Terry Garr. She plays Ronnie Neary. And she's been in Tootsie, Young Frankenstein, the TV show McCloud, and Batman Begins. Next is Melinda Dillon. She plays Julian Goulier. I don't know how to say this. I'll say Julian Guiler. I think that's it. She's been in Magnolia, A Christmas Story, and Harry and the Hendersons. Next is Bob Balaban. I almost messed it up. Bob Balaban. He plays David Laffin. He's been in 2010, The Year We Made Contact, Ghost World, and he's on the podcast Wolverine. Wolverine is a dramatic podcast based on the comic book character Wolverine, obviously. And finally, I don't even remember seeing him in the film, but I just love this actor. We have Lance Henriksen. He played Robert, and he's been in Hard Target, Alien versus Predator. He's your favorite creepy old guy. And that's all I have for actors. There are a lot more talented folks that were in front of the camera, but I'm just going to cut it off right there because I want to get to the director. This movie was directed by Steven Spielberg. And he directed Jurassic Park, Saving Private Ryan, Amistad. He's got a new movie coming out called Fabelmans. He's directed many of your favorite films. Now, he's not batting 1,000, but he's way more consistent at making great films than he is at a lot of other directors. And even the movies that do poorly are still fun to watch. Even not that it's so bad it's good, but his bad movies, his quote unquote bad movies, are better than a lot of other people's best movies. Let's put it that way. This movie was written by Steven Spielberg. So it originally had like two writers. That's Har Barwood. He's uncredited. He had written Warning Signs, Dragon Slayer, and The Sugarland Express. And also Jerry Belson, uncredited. He's written for The Tracy Ullman Show, The Odd Couple, and Always. And Steven Spielberg is credited for creating the Medal of Honor video game. I did not know that. There's also Amazing Stories, a TV series. He's also written on The Sugarland Express and The Goonies. So the music for this movie was provided by none other than John Williams. You know him, you love him. He's written Star Wars, E.T., the Extraterrestrial, Jaws. I could go on, Jurassic Park. He's just an amazing composer. Superman, the movie, it goes on and on. He's pretty awesome. That's it for the rundown of the actors, directors, some of the people that I wanted to highlight behind the camera. And if you are enjoying this show, remember that you can get t-shirts, hoodies, shot glasses, face masks, pint glasses, and more at our website, backlookcinema.com, where you can click on the link to either teespring.com or tpublic.com. And now we're going to take a short news break. All right, this is our news break section. This is just stuff I heard, stuff I perused on the internet that kind of fell into my feed on Twitter, that sort of thing. So I just heard about the passing of actor and comedian Louis Anderson at age 68 years old. He was one of the old school comedians that I grew up with. And you may know the song Gold Digger by Kanye West. And there's a line in the song that goes, "He got ambition, babies. Look at his eyes. This week he mopping floors. Next week is the fries." You remember that part. So that line is is a direct reference to a line that Louis Anderson's character Maurice says in Coming to America, where he says, "Hey, I started out mopping the floor and just like you guys, but now I'm washing lettuce. So I'll be on fries, then the grill. In a year or two, I'll make assistant manager, and that's when the big bucks start rolling in." And I found that that's one of the most memorable parts of Coming to America is that, Louis Anderson's short appearance in that movie. And he's been in cartoons, game shows, sitcoms, for over 40 years. The cartoon he was in is basically, I think it was about him growing up as a little kid, but with his same cigarette voice. He kind of has a cigarette voice. Like he really sounds like cigarettes did a number on his larynx. So if you can imagine his voice coming out of a little kid, that was his character, and he will be missed. The next thing I heard was it's not directly related to movies, but it's related to my own interest. And that is Microsoft, maker of Xbox, buys video game giant Activision Blizzard, and who also own King, for almost $70 billion. Last year, they acquired Bethesda Software for around $7.5 billion. Microsoft, it's really throwing its weight around. And if you don't know King, well, you probably would, because King is the maker of Candy Crush, and Candy Crush is probably the most popular handheld game in the world. And I know they have a couple of other games, but Candy Crush is really the big dog in the mobile gaming market. And Microsoft just buys it. And it's like, I thought, like last year when they bought Bethesda, I thought $7.5 billion is a big deal. Apparently, I wasn't thinking big enough. I mean, that's just an incredible event for gamers everywhere. There's constant speculation about what that will mean for gaming, and we will see the fallout in a couple of years of these incredible purchases. The next thing I heard was about previews of shows that are coming out that I'm really interested in. So Star Trek Picard has announced a release date of March 3rd on Paramount Plus. You remember that I reported earlier that they had to actually stop production on the show for, I guess, a couple of weeks because so many of the team had come down with COVID, but I guess everybody's over it, and they had started working last week, and now they're sticking to their March 3rd premiere date. They just released a second trailer that confirmed the return of Whoopi Goldberg as Guinan and John DeLance as Q. So people have known that these characters are coming back, these actors were coming back, and it was particularly dramatic as Patrick Stewart had appeared on, I think it's The View, the show that Whoopi Goldberg is on. And right there, live on The View, he invited Whoopi Goldberg to return with him to his show, Picard. And she accepted right there on the spot. It was all, tear-jerky. It was a tear-jerky moment and dramatic and live. And it was just awesome. I definitely will be watching for the return of Whoopi Goldberg on Star Trek. The next thing I heard was Giant Freaking Robot has reported via THR that Star Trek Discovery is returning on February 10th and has been renewed for season 4. Inverse.com reported that Star Trek Strange New Worlds will premiere on May 9th. These shows will be released back to back to back. So they're going to show one show, and then after that show has its run, they're going to show the next show, and after that show has its run. You know the deal. And it'll just be, and these series are short. Like they're not like the shows of yesteryear where you would have like 20 episodes in a season. These episodes only have maybe 6 to 8 episodes per season. So since they're doing it back to back, it'll run almost the whole year. So it's like you're watching Star Trek and your Star Trek changes flavor as you continue watching it. So people say that there are too many Star Trek series. I say the nay. Nay, there are not too many Star Trek series. I am really watching them all. And some are better than others, but I'm still enjoying my time with Star Trek. What is of particular interest with Star Trek Strange New Worlds is that it's going to go back to an episodic formula. So each episode will be a different story each episode. It's not going to have an overarching narrative throughout the series as the other two series. So moving along, I just saw the trailer for the animated spinoff of the series of the Amazon show, The Boys. It's called The Boys Diabolical. So this is an animated show that is not for children. I'll just say that. In the trailer they show, it's basically a red band trailer. It shows a child with super I-beam powers, and she zaps a bunch of, government officials that are after her or something like that. But she doesn't do it maliciously. She's just a child. She's just having fun. Everybody's a toys to her, and she just zaps them, and there's blood everywhere. So we can expect the same tone from the show. This show is called The Boys Diabolical. We can expect the same tone as The Boys, the actual show, which is a bloody take on a superhero drama. And when I say bloody take, I mean there is blood everywhere in most episodes. There is limbs coming apart. I think there was a decapitation. There's some there's a lot of violence, a lot of hardcore violence in The Boys, and I love it. I can't wait for it to return. So that's all we have for Stuff I Heard, the new segment. Let's get back to the show. We're back. Once again, thanks for joining us. As a reminder, you can keep up with us by following us on our socials on Instagram and Facebook at Backlook Cinema Podcast and on Twitter at Backlook Cinema. We encourage you to leave feedback, comments, suggestions, etc., or you can email us at fanmail@backlookcinema.com. So now we get to the heart of the show, the beating heart of the Backlook Cinema Podcast, and that would be the favorite parts. The favorite parts of this movie from yesteryear. I want to dig into some of the stuff that I loved about this movie. You're going to hear paper wrestling because I'm holding paper. All right. So, the movie starts with the air traffic controllers, and this scene is a trip because you get to see how air traffic controllers actually communicate, and that was kind of fun. So in this scene, I learned that air traffic controllers refer to aircraft as traffic. So if they want to say that an airplane is approaching them, they will say traffic is approaching us, and I thought that was interesting. And apparently they used real air traffic controller jargon or real air traffic controllers for this scene. I'm not exactly sure if those were actors or they were actual air traffic controllers. That's the only thing that I'm confused about. But that was a scene where they first discover mysterious traffic in the sky, and it's witnessed by 3 aircraft, and it's on the radar in the air traffic control tower. And they're referring to it, and they're saying it's got bright lights. It doesn't have a clear outline. And then after that event, and it goes real close to one of the planes that's talking to the tower. And so the tower asks them, point blank, do you want to report a UFO? And the first guy was like, nope, no, I do not want to report a UFO. And he asked the two other pilots in kind, like, do you want to report a UFO? He asked this question directly, and they both said, I do not want to report a UFO. And the other guy says, I wouldn't even know what to report. And the traffic controller says, well, I don't know what to report either. Right. So they all kind of witness that. That is actually the close encounter of the first kind. They all witness it, but nobody wants to acknowledge that they all witnessed a UFO. Here's something funny about this movie. I actually don't remember much of it. I must have seen it when I was very young. I do remember having a Close Encounters of the Third Kind lunchbox and thermos. It was a metal lunchbox that you see the retro version of at Target all the time. But when I was growing up, I was actively using these lunchboxes. And so I had the Close Encounter one. So I remember that. I remember seeing it. I don't know if I saw it in the theater or if I saw it at home when it eventually came home, but I'm pretty sure that I saw it at the theater. And there are only 2 scenes that I actually remember. And the funny thing about this is that, so I like to talk about some of my favorite movies on this podcast. That's the gist of the show. But this is a movie that is going to kind of transition to some of the other movies that I want to dive into on the show. So I'm going to start doing shows that I never seen that I've heard are good movies, and I'm going to start doing those. So this show is kind of a transition into that format. It's not going to be every episode. Just every once in a while, I'm going to take a look at movies that I should have seen, but I never saw. And so this movie is like, I only partially remember. And one of the parts that I remember is the UFO chase. So there is a scene where one of the main characters, this is, like I said, this is like 2 stories. So this is the story that takes place in Indiana in the United States. So you have Roy, and he's, I forgot what he was doing, but he was on the road doing something. I think this is after his actual first encounter with the UFO. So there are some lights that are traveling along the highway. They're not on the highway; they're floating above the highway. But it's like they're hugging the highway. They're flying right above the road, and it was not even a highway. It's basically some back roads, and the police are chasing them. They're chasing these lights along the road, and they're just following these lights. And Roy actually witnessed part of this chase. And then at the end of the chase, they come to a bend of the road. Now, these flying objects are actually flying. So they're basically slightly smaller than cars, and I think there are 3 car-sized objects, and then one tiny like drone-sized object following the car-sized objects, and they're basically just bright lights. You really can't see the outline of them. You don't know what shape they are because they got lights that are blazing out of every direction, so you really can't see them. You can only see these lights. And then they come to a bend in the road on it's not like a steep drop, but is a significant drop that you don't want to drive over. And they just go over this bend and they continue flying. And the lead police car doesn't realize he's coming to a bend in the road, and he goes right over, and he lands on the side of a hill a little bit. And the other police cars are, I remember now that Roy actually joins the chase. He joins he joins the police cars chasing these lights. And then when the first police car is over, he's right behind the first police car. And then he stops because he doesn't want to go over. He saw what happened to the first police cars, and all the other police cars that were in the chase, they stopped in succession, and the lights going in the sky. And that's actually the second time he has his first encounter. So that was great. It's fun to see the police not paying attention, going over the cliff. That was something to laugh at. So, well, let me go back to his first encounter. That was a trip. So he's the power in his town starts to go out in Indiana, and he gets called into work. He goes into work, and they're discussing what they're going to have to do to get the power on. And even though he's a junior technician, they send him out to do his boss's job, since his boss wasn't able to make it to work. And he goes out there and he's instantly lost. He's looking on maps, trying to figure out where he's at. He stops in the middle of the road, and a car comes up behind him, and he just kind of waves his hand like you do, trying to wave the car to go around his truck, looking on the map, trying to figure out where he's at and where he's trying to get to. And then he drives a little bit more, and then he stops again and trying to look at the map, and he can tell that there are lights behind him. It's another truck, and then he waves the truck to go around him. Actually, now that I think about it, was it even a truck? Because they're just lights. And so instead of going around him like cars do, it goes up. It goes up above him. So, and he doesn't really notice this. And that's when you have like this incredible event happen where it's like there's a strong beam of light coming from the sky, and there's the mailboxes are shaking, the ground is shaking, his truck is going on is like starts to levitate a little bit. His papers and stuff in his truck is flying everywhere. The radio comes on and off. All the dials are going all over the place. He's having a moment with this it's almost like a supernatural event going on inside of his truck. And he kind of leans out and looks up and tries to look at the light, but the light is so bright that he can't actually look at it. And then it suddenly stops, and the lights go away. And that was a cool event. The thing about this movie, I wanted to point out that the very first scene is the other story where they find airplanes in the desert, and they're trying to figure out they're World War II planes. They're in pristine conditions, like almost brand new. They still have fuel, and the planes still run, that all the dials work, and it's trying to figure out how these brand new World War II planes end up in the desert. There's also apparently a ship in the desert, but they're not as interested as that ship. And there's a local who has some firsthand knowledge of how these airplanes end up in the desert, and they have a hard time getting him to talk. What happens is that when he finally speaks, he said, the sun came in the, and when he said the sun, he's talking about the sun that supposedly appeared in the daytime, the star. He says, the sun came in the middle of the night and it sang to me, right? So, and his face was completely sunburned. So that is how the movie opens up. And that's where we're introduced to Lacombe, the Frenchman. He has a translator. It's funny because in most of the movie, he speaks French with some, and he colors it. Well, not colors. He has little instances of English because he doesn't it's not his main language. So his translator is able to do the most of the translation for him. So that's what comes out. The guy said, and I think the guy is speaking Spanish. So somebody translates the Spanish to English, and then the interpreter changes it from English to French for the Frenchman. So yeah, he said the sun came in the middle of the night and sang to me. So that creates what my second point is about Steven Spielberg, is that he has a way of using horror tropes to, instead of create fear, he uses it to create awe and wonder. And that is what he's best at. That's why people go to see his movies, because when it's a Spielberg movie, they expect to see like shock, awe, and wonder, especially on his science fiction movies, but even in some of his more grounded movies, his movies that are more grounded in real life. He's able to create a sense of scale for the audience. He's very good at that. So that's what he does. That's what most of this movie is. It's a lot of suspense, and it is a lot of a way of creating awe. It's one of the things that really elevated him in the minds of his fan base. Basically, most of the people who go see his movies. Let's go. I forgot what I was talking about, but I'm just going to go to one of my other favorite parts is that so Roy, after his encounter, the first time he sees the UFOs and the second time, he starts to have this compulsion to build something. All right. So at first he's kind of building it with a shaving cream. He's trying to create a shape that he kind of sees it. He basically has a tip of the tongue syndrome over the shape that he's trying to build, essentially. And he's first he tries to do it with a shaving cream, and then he has a discussion with his wife that because at first he before even the shave, I think it was, I can't remember exactly when it was, but at this point half of his face is sunburned because of his encounter with the alien, with the UFO, I should say. And it's, his wife is trying to say, nothing happened. We're just going to continue going with our lives. But Roy is like, no, we gotta go and investigate this. So he gets his family up early in the morning, and they go to the site where he had seen that he had seen a UFO. There's a bunch of people there, but nothing shows up. So they kind of continue life as before, but he still has this obsession. There's also this woman who at nearly the same instance, her name is Julian. So I mentioned her before. So Julian has to chase her son all up and down Indiana because her son is chasing these UFOs. So she's chasing her son, and that's where she first meets Roy. And they see each other again the third time Roy goes out to the same spot to try to see UFOs. And at this time, his family, he has a wife with 4 kids. His family is basically lost interest in UFOs, but Roy is still obsessed with it. And the third time he goes to that same spot, there are a bunch of people in that same spot, basically waiting for UFOs. And that's when Roy sees Julian again. Or is it Julianne? It doesn't look like Julianne. It looks like Julianne. But anyways, and then, they see her son playing around. And then this is when you got the helicopters, and they come and they're shining bright lights. Well, here's what happens. They see bright lights in the sky, and they think they see aliens. But then as it turns out, they're just helicopters. And this is the start of the government cover up. So, because they want people to think they saw ordinary aircrafts and not UFOs. So as I was saying, Roy starts to see this shape everywhere, and this continues in the beginning part. Well, not closer to the middle part, where he starts making this shape that he can't quite see in his mind. It's almost like he can feel it and not see it. So first he does it with a shaving cream, and then he's in a briefing with a bunch of I guess it's the Army or the Air Force, some government officials, and basically they're trying to convince them that they didn't see UFOs. And he's making this shape. He's drawing this shape on a piece of newspaper, and then you see him again where he's making this shape with his mashed potatoes. He's totally obsessed with this shape, and his family knows that he's obsessed with this shape, and his oldest son is starting to cry because he feels that there's something wrong with dad, because he puts a whole bunch of mashed potatoes on his plate and he's trying to make this shape, and he's collecting all of these newspaper clippings about UFOs. And then later on, you see in the movie, you see he likes to build model planes, no, I'm sorry, not model planes, model trains. He likes to build model trains. And so I guess in the basement, he has a bunch of, he has a model train set, but he also builds miniatures. Like he has a miniature town for his model train. And so he works with clay. So he had taken a bunch of clay and he was trying to create this thing that he keeps seeing in his vision. And it basically looks like a big mountain with a pointy top, and it's not quite right. And he can't get it. He sees it in his mind, but he can't figure out what it, he doesn't quite see it. So he knows that it's the thing that he is making is not matching the thing that's in his mind. At this point, he decides to give up. He says, it's okay. It's okay, family. I'm back to normal. I'm not going to continue to obsess over this. So it's okay. And he starts to throw away his newspaper clipping and all this other stuff. He starts to, I guess, disassemble the model or whatever. It's just a bunch of clay. So, he's kind of angry and frustrated. So he tries to he's trying to, I guess, take down the model, and he grabs the model by the tip of the tippity top of the model, the pointy top, and he starts to pull on it, and it basically comes in half. So he pulls, instead of pulling down the entire model, he pulls down just the top tip of the model, and he gets this shape. So now you have basically a mountain with a flat top instead of a pointy top. And his obsession begins all over again. And that is the shape that he's been seeing in his head. That's the shape that's been bothering. He finally got it. And he goes crazy all over again. Now this time he goes way over the top. So later on, he's like taking dirt and he's shoveling dirt into his windows. He's like, first his wife sees him pulling up plants, like just pulling up the plants that are surrounding their home. And you got, first is just a nosy neighbor looking at him. And he's fully into uprooting these plants. And then next time you see him, he has a wheelbarrow full of dirt, and he's shoveling the dirt from the wheelbarrow into his kitchen window. And they're trying to talk to him, but he's not really listening. And then he just goes and grabs a bunch of random crap around his house, and he just starts throwing it into the kitchen window. He goes to his neighbor. Now it's more than just the nosy neighbor. It's a lot of other people. Now they're concerned, right? So they're all watching him as he goes and he actually pulls up this chicken wire that this woman uses to encage her. I guess she has a flock of geeses, or ducks. Apparently they can't fly because they're fenced in, and ducks can fly. They can fly out. So I guess these are some flightless ducks that she keeps as pets or something. And so he goes and he pulls up this chicken wire and takes it to his house. And, she's like, what you're doing is illegal. And he's like, I'll pay you for it. I'll pay you for it. Right. Just taking her stuff. And then he has an encounter with a trash man. The trash man is about to dump his trash. Like he grabs the trash can and he starts to lift it to the trash truck. But then Roy grabs the other handle and he starts having a tug of war with the trash can. And then he tugs it away from the trash man and he starts to dump the trash on the ground, which is, if you were going to dump the trash on the ground, you could have just let the trash man dump the trash and the trash compactor in the truck. So at this point you could tell he's all the way crazy. So he finally, he grabs the trash can. He dumps it like some of the trash on the ground. So I guess he wanted to keep some of that trash. And then he takes the trash can and he chucks it through the kitchen window. At this point, his wife is like, she basically gives up. She don't know what's wrong with him. She decides that he's too far gone. She gets the kids and she doesn't even pack. She just gets the kids and she packs them in the car and she's going to her sister's house. He makes a pretty good effort to try to stop her from leaving him and to try to explain himself, but he is too far gone at this point. So she is gone. And so with her gone, his kids gone, he decides to just give into his work. You know, he's fully into his work now. He starts to chuck everything through the kitchen window and then he crawls through the kitchen window himself. Why he doesn't use the door? I don't know. He's gone. I say he's gone. And then the next time you see him with a pretty accurate 3D representation. He finally got the thing in his head, and the thing that he saw was Devil's Mountain. He doesn't know what it is yet. He just know he's done it. He finished it. He did what he came to do. And then he looks on TV and there's news about a chemical accident, and they show a picture of the location of the chemical accident, and it happens to be a mountain. And then when he looks at the TV and he looks at his model, he notices that they're the exact same thing. He did an exact replication of this real life mountain somewhere in Wyoming, and it's called Devil's Tower. And he's obsessed. Now he finds out that he has to go there. So in another part of the story, you have Julian, and she is also obsessed, and she's painting these pictures of this mountain everywhere. It's like she'll paint a bunch of them and then she'll throw them away, but then she's so obsessed that she continues to paint it because she's really into it. And it's at one of these obsessive compulsive painting sessions where the aliens, the UFOs, visit her specifically to have a negotiation with her son. Really, they want to take him on a trip. And she instinctively believes that the aliens are trying to take her son. She's terrified of the aliens. She tries to lock her house down. She locks all the doors. She puts a chair in front of the door. She tries to huddle in the corner, like hugging her son. And the aliens, you know, they're just, oh, sorry about that. They're just light. They're just bright lights. They're shining all over her house. You never get a chance to really see the UFOs distinctly. What you see are just the lights that represents them. And so the lights are shining, do everything. At one point, they actually start to unscrew one of the air vents in her house on the floor. You know, it's like the screws look like they start to unscrew themselves, and then something punches the vent away from the opening once the screws are undone. And she covers that with a carpet. Like she doesn't know what to do. These are advanced beings. And, she closes the shutter in her chimney, so that they won't come through the chimney. And while she's terrified, her son is absolutely delighted. It's like, he's just saying toys. And he's also saying, come through the door, come through the front door. And finally, for some reason they have a doggy door. I don't see a dog, but they have a doggy door in their house. And the son, wanting to meet the alien, starts to crawl through this doggy door, and something grabs a hold of him from the other side of the door. We don't see what, and she grabs her son's legs, but then they just snatch him away and he's gone. And she's already obsessed with UFOs. Now she has like a tangible physical reason to be super obsessed with them. So like Roy, she needs to go to Wyoming. She already knows she needs to go there. And now she has a reason to be there because she has a strong feeling that that's where her son is. And so eventually Roy and Julia hook up. They're in Wyoming. They're going towards the town. There is a funny scene where you have the government officials and they're trying to figure out how they can get the people out of Wyoming. And they're talking about different scenarios. And one of the scenarios they come up with is like, anthrax. Yeah, anthrax. And they're like pointing at each other because they think they found the thing to get hundreds of thousands of people out of this particular area. And then their senior was like, no, that's not going to work. Because there's always one dude who thinks he's immune to anthrax. We need something that'll get every red-blooded American Christian out of this area. And so that's when you see on the news is reporting that there's been a chemical spill and they need to get everybody out, and everybody's wearing gas masks. So that basically does it. So as Roy and Julian are coming into the town where Devil's Tower is located, everybody else they're doing a mass evacuation. So there's also a funny scene where we have, before Roy actually gets with Julian, he runs into this army sergeant who happens to be played by Carl Weathers. And I was like, oh my God, is that Carl Weathers? And it's just a small bit part, but he's very charming in it. And he's basically telling people, they can't go into the town. They got to go. And he runs into Roy, and Roy was like, oh, my sister's in the town. And he's like, yeah, well, we've evacuated. Why don't you give me your sister's name and we can find out where she's located? And and Roy is trying to like hem and haw, and he's trying to bogart this army sergeant, but the sergeant isn't taking it. And the sergeant's like, what's your name? And Roy goes, Smith. As a refresher, Roy's last name is Neary, but he tries to claim that his name is Smith. And the army sergeant goes, well, listen here, Smith, we've got orders to shoot looters on sight. And that's when Roy decides to give up trying to go through the army and try to go around them. And so at that point, that's when he finds Julian, and they get together in his rental car, which looks exactly like the vehicle that he owns that his wife had taken with the kids. So they get into the car and they start taking the cross country route. They go off road and they just start driving on the dirt to try to figure out how to get to the tower without attracting the interest of the authorities. And so as they get closer to Devil's Tower, they start to see like dead cattle. They see dead sheep. Well, they appear to be dead. And then Roy was like, you know what? This whole chemical spill is just a put on. And they look at each other, and then they don the gas mask. They happen to have gas masks with them. And they both put them on, because even though Roy believes that the chemical story is fake, he still puts on his gas mask. So that was a funny part. And then they finally get there, but the site is already occupied by the scientists and the army. So when they get there, they're immediately taken into interrogation, and they only show Roy's interrogation, but you see that there are other people who have the same obsession that had witnessed the aliens, and apparently they're from all over the country. So these are the people who could just make it. And, there are a lot of people there, they're just not able to make it. But these are just the people that actually completed their journey to Devil's Tower. They don't know why they're there. They only know that they're obsessed with it. And that's where Lacrome is, and he's leading this project. And they ask a bunch of questions of Roy, but they don't actually give any answers. And so they're, finally, it gets to the point where, they decide, like, basically to just get everybody off the base. Everybody that had showed up for this encounter, they get everybody off. But Roy is still determined, which leads to where everybody's in, like, 2 helicopters that are about to lift off. And first Roy does, he tries to convince people that, the whole chemical spill is a fake, and he takes off his own mask to demonstrate. And then, and a couple of people follow suit, but most people keep their masks on. And then just as the army is about to close the helicopter doors, what Roy does is there's another passenger. He pushes that passenger on top of the guy that's trying to close the door, and uses that distraction for him and Julian to get out of the helicopter and just start running away. And then the third guy that gets pushed out, he's also running. So they're running out the mountain. The army has a hard time finding them. So that's when they send the helicopters, and what the helicopter is going to do is that they're going to spray the same gas that put the animals to sleep to put the humans asleep. The funny thing is, the animals weren't dead that they saw on the road. They were just put to sleep with some kind of chemical, some kind of sleep agent. And so they get one guy, that third guy, with the sleep agent, but they somehow miss Julian and Roy, and they get over to the other side of the mountain. And the other neat thing is that while most other people, they did a 2D drawing of Devil's Tower, they only saw like one side. That one side was prominent in everybody's mind. So that's I guess the side that was facing the road. That is the side that everybody drew. But since Roy did a 3D model of the mountain, he knew how to get up the mountain. He knew all the passes and stuff because he built it. So he showed them how to get up the mountain. And then that's when they get on the other side. And the army is only spraying one side of the mountain because on the other side there is the science, where the science station is, or the base is, the science base is, where they expect the aliens to show up. Now I skipped over the part as to why they're here. It's basically the aliens told them where they intend to meet the humans at. So the aliens sent a text. It's like, yo, meet me right here. We're going to be right here. We're going to wait for y'all over at this Devil's Tower place. And the scientists like, bet. And so the scientists set up everything. They set up all the communication equipment, everything, because the aliens had used musical tones. They got like a DJ with a keyboardist there waiting to communicate with the aliens. And that's when, like, the third act, well, the final act, I should say, Roy eventually goes down. And the whole thing is just a marvel of entertainment. It's kind of hard to describe, but it's like the aliens come down and they play the tone, and then the people play the tone back. You've probably seen this memed hundreds of times, or you've seen clips of this in commentary on Close Encounters of the Third Time. This is the other part that I remember. Like, I remember the UFO chase, and I remember this part. I think everybody remembers this part when they communicate with the aliens. And so this is why I know that I must have seen the movie, at least parts of it. I may have fallen asleep on other parts. I was 7. So everybody knows the communication between the humans and the aliens. And then the aliens leave. The humans think that they're done. There's like, oh, good job. It's a good game. And they start patting each other on the butt. And then next thing you know, the mothership comes, and it's a huge ship. It dwarfs the other, smaller car-sized UFOs. It's festooned with lights and noise and vibrations, and they come over and they play and then they play the tunes back and forth, and then finally aliens, they release the people that they had abducted from Earth. It's really a handful of people, probably a couple of dozen, including the Air Force or Navy pilots that they had abducted from World War II. They hadn't aged. And the scientists suspect that the craft had traveled at relativistic speeds. And if you understand Einstein's theory of relativity, time is relative. So the spacecraft had went somewhere, and then they came back. So the men didn't age. And neither had anybody else that had been abducted. So they should have been in their like 50s and 60s, and they were like in their 30s, 20s or 30s. So anyways, that was an iconic moment in the movie. And the other iconic moment is when, after that, they released they actually, kind of grabbed Roy. They had prepared like a series of people to go on a spacecraft. They reasoned that since the aliens were abducting random people, that they would be interested in people who volunteered to go. So they had actually trained a group of most likely military personnel to go onto the alien spacecraft. And then at some point, when they finally notice Roy is there among them, because Roy goes down the mountain, he's actually, excuse me, with the scientists. They don't notice him because everybody is focused on the giant UFO, the giant spacecraft. You can say it's a spacecraft now. It's not unidentified. They know what it is. So they don't notice him. He's down there amongst them. And then when he's finally noticed, Lacrom finally notices him, and they decide that Roy should go. So Roy goes out with the other men that are prepared, men and women that are prepared to go onto the spaceship. And then that's when the spaceship opens and the aliens come out. Now, thing about the aliens, you can tell that this movie was based on reported UFO encounters because they are the classic Greys aliens. So if you're unfamiliar with the Greys, there are like several classic versions of UFO encounters. So one of them are like people that kind of look like us, and the other one is the Greys. And I think there's a third kind of aliens that people keep saying all the time, but I can't remember what they look like. But the Greys they're called Greys because they got gray skin. They're human shaped. They got larger heads, and they got large black eyes. They got small mouths. If you watched any of the classic alien encounters, so-called true story events or in television, then I guess you know what I'm talking about. So a more handsome version of E.T., essentially. So these aliens come out and they start to greet the humans, and they see a line of humans preparing to go, and they choose Roy, like it's as if they had chosen Roy the entire time, and they clamor around Roy and they take Roy into the spaceship, and that is essentially the end of the movie. But the thing about to emphasize about this movie, it's really the sense of wonder and joy that or awe that you get from watching this movie. So, and this movie came out at the same year that Star Wars. It's all, I think Steven Spielberg and George Lucas had a bet at who would make the most money at the box office, and clearly the winner was Star Wars, but Close Encounters of the Third Kind is no slouch. So that's the whole movie, and the parts that I mentioned, those are some of my favorite parts. There are a lot of commentary where it gets kind of slow in the middle of it, and that's probably true. In the beginning and a little part in the middle, it was a little bit slow, but I think that was all a part of creating that atmosphere of wonder, and I think Steven Spielberg did a great job of that. I don't see this movie being remade in any significant way, because if they try to remake this movie, it's going to be bad. It's going to be like one of the worst movies ever made. So it's a classic. Leave the classic alone. It's good the way it is. So, yeah, that was Close Encounters of the Third Kind. And now let's get to the trivia section, as usual, brought on by, or copied and pasted from, IMDb. It's now, I guess I should say, it's my favorite website. I like it because it has all the trivia in one place. Like sometimes I go out to other sources to find trivia, but usually all the trivia that I need is in this one place. Now, I didn't get everything. It had a lot of trivia on this particular movie. So and then there was some that I already knew from past experience with this movie. So I'll just shout out one of the ones. I hadn't wrote it down. It wasn't on Close Encounters. I don't know where I grabbed it from, but so basically it's probably a DVD commentary. I don't know. Anyways, so everybody's familiar with the giant spaceship. There was so much light around it that you couldn't actually see the actual shape of the craft. But you could see some things, like you could see like that it was roughly spherical, and they had arms that shot out from the main body of the craft. And that's what most people tend to see. But they actually put lots of tiny little Easter egg details in the spacecraft. And so they had a model of R2-D2, because one of the guys that they had to make the miniatures had previously worked on Star Wars. So when people decided to put random things onto the mothercraft, he decided, well, he put an R2 unit on the spacecraft. He made a tiny model of the TIE fighter. Like the main spheroid part of this TIE fighter was pea-sized. So these aren't details that you're going to be able to see like when you're watching it in the theater. Maybe if you stop and what I'm trying to do. What am I trying to say? I guess if you do enough close examination of the spaceship as you're watching the movie, you'll be able to see these little details, but they really weren't designed to be seen. They're basically designed to give texture to the spacecraft. So they had a tiny R2-D2, a tiny TIE fighter. They had a tiny cemetery or graveyard. They had a tiny VW bus. All of these little extras that the effects team was just putting on the spacecraft. And I heard that there were sometimes the team would work 34-hour days or 32-hour days to get this, to make the effects for the film. And the other thing I want to say is that the special effects were awesome. They were almost all practical effects. Steven Spielberg actually looked into doing CGI, but in the 1980s, CGI was not there yet. It was not ready for prime time. So everything was practical effect. It all looked, it really stands up. It really stands up. And it looks realer than CGI. So they used all the tricks at the time, like forced perspective, the modeling, and all the tricks that they did at that time. And they were kind of inventing it because there was no like school that you can go to for visual effects. They were just making it up as they went along. And the special effects, because they didn't try to do CGI, I think is the reason that it really holds up. The only thing maybe is they used a little bit of claymation, I think. They use stop motion techniques. And so you can kind of see that some of the aliens, or at least one particular alien was stop motion. It was one alien that was stop motion, and all the other aliens were kids in alien costumes. So, and this aliens, you can kind of see the stop motion, but you can just attribute that to its alienness. So, to continue, during the Neary dinner, this is Roy's family. During the Neary dinner scene, just before Roy piles on mashed potatoes, the little girl, Sylvia, who's played by Adrienne Campbell, says, "There's a dead fly on my potatoes." This was unscripted and almost caused the rest of the cast to laugh. The scene was kept as is. And yeah, you can hear the little girl shout, "There's a fly," because there probably was a fly on her potatoes and she wanted to let everybody know. Next up, child actor Gary Guffey. I'm going to say Cary Guffey. I should have tried to pronounce this ahead of time, but I didn't. So Cary Guffey, he played Julian's son. He was a kid that got swept up by the spacecraft. He was the one that was like, I'm down with the aliens. I want to go into the flying lights. So child actor Cary Guffey's performance was so good that they only had to do 1 or 2 takes of each shot he was in. He became known as One Take Cary on the set, and director Steven Spielberg had a t-shirt printed up for him with the phrase written on it. And the thing about this is that he is a child. He's like 5 or 6. He's a very small child, and small children are notorious to work with, especially in Hollywood. So that they were so enamored and so impressed by the professionalism of this child. It speaks a lot to his performance. Next up, the iconic 5-note melody. Oh, I see, pronunciation is a challenge. The iconic 5-note melody was a chance arrangement by both composer John Williams and director Steven Spielberg, happened to like out of hundreds of different permutations. The tone was later used in Moonraker from 1979 and again in the cue line in Star Tours, 1987. Star Tours was a ride. I don't know where this ride was, but it was a ride where you kind of get into the Millennium Falcon. It looks like the Millennium Falcon. It looks like you are in, it's almost like a movie where you get into, you reputedly get into the Millennium Falcon. You kind of have an adventure. Yeah. Us older folks remember Star Tours. It's kind of like a roller coaster ride with a movie screen, a very mild roller coaster ride at best. So Stanley Kubrick was so impressed with Cary Guffey's performance that he wanted him to play Danny Torrance in The Shining from 1980. However, Kubrick didn't get him for the role because of schedule conflicts. Guffey was filming the Italian film, and I'm going to totally mess this up, Uno Serific Extraterrestri Poco Extra e Molto Terrestre. And that's from 1979. It is the sequel to, and he was in the sequel, Everything Happens to Me from 1980. And so Kubrick cast Danny Lloyd instead. I had read what the name of this film, but I forgot to write it down. But anyways, I messed up the name, so no worries. So the film was partly inspired by an experience from Steven Spielberg's childhood when, without advance warning, his parents rushed the children into the car one night, drove into an area where many others would gather, and watch a spectacular meteor shower. And that there's a scene like that kind of plays out in the film. Next up, the words that the crowds in India chants are, and I'm going to mess this up. I strongly apologize to my listeners in India. But I think they're saying, Aya Re Aya, which means he has come in Hindi. So that is like one of the first instances of the encounters. There's a crowd of Indians, and they are chanting this tone over and over again. They're chanting this phrase. And that's when Lakram comes, and he's trying to ask people, what are they saying? What are they saying? No, not what are they saying. He said, where did they hear this from? It's like he wants to know where they heard it from. And then finally, when he asked the crowd where they heard this sound from, everybody in the crowd pointed up, like directly into the sky. So I think that is when Lakram got the instance that he was dealing with extraterrestrials. Next up, the John Williams score was created before the film was edited. Steven Spielberg edited the film to match the music, a reverse of what is usually done in the film scoring process. Both Spielberg and Williams felt that it ultimately gave the film a lyrical feel. Next up, director Steven Spielberg stated that nothing in his life has been more difficult than editing the final 35 minutes of this film. Yeah, and it looked good to me. It was very impressive. People don't understand how difficult or how crucial the editing process is to the making of a feature film, or even a video or TV show. The people who are on YouTube or TikTok, they have a grasp of how important editing is. But especially back in like the 1970s, nobody really knew how important that editing was to a film. That really could make or break a film. It made Star Wars. It broke Suicide Squad. Let's put it that way. And next up I have the situation on U.S. Navy Flight 19, from which the airplanes that appeared in the Mexican desert disappeared off Fort Lauderdale, Florida in December 1943. No trace has ever been found of the lost Flight 19, which left Naval Air Station near there in 1945. So I wasn't sure that they were in Mexico. I always got this concept that they were in Europe for some reason, because of Lacroix, the Frenchman. So apparently they were in Mexico when they discovered the planes in the Mexican desert. And that's where basically his story takes place until he gets to Wyoming. Next up, I'm sorry. It's not even Daniel. It's not even a mispronunciation. I don't know what that was. Douglas Trumbull achieved the dramatic cloud effects by filling a tank half full of salt water with lighter fresh water on top, then injecting paint into the top layer. The paint billowed through the fresh water, but flattened on top of the heavier salt water, creating the effect we see on screen. And Francois Truffaut, English was not strong. You could tell when you watched the movie. To get through some of his scenes, he stuck pieces of paper with his lines on them on various objects where he could read them and the camera would not pick them up. In one case, as he argues face to face with an army officer who has his back to the camera. He is reading his line off a card pinned to the man's chest. He had shown the same trick to an actress who was having trouble with her lines in Day for Night from 1973, in which he played the director of the movie within the movie. So yeah, and it's like I said, he's a very good actor because you really can't tell. Unlike Marlon Brando, you really can't tell that he's reading his lines. He really looks like he's in the scene. Next up, this film is shown every night at the Devil's Tower KOA campground, thereby making it one of the most screened movies ever. Yeah, it's got to be. Melinda Dillon was suffering from a broken big toe when location shooting began in May 1976 at Devil's Tower. Afraid she might be misplaced, Dillon toughed it out during the filming of the scenes in which she, Richard Dreyfuss, and Yosef Sommer as Larry Butler made a run for the mountain. So that was the end of the scene. I was like, it looked rough. It was amazing because you can't tell that she had a broken big toe. She's a wonderful actress. According to Melinda Dillon, hold on, how am I doing this? What am I reading? Okay, I know where I'm at now. According to Melinda Dillon, because it was done without rehearsal, the scene in the kitchen with all of the objects flying around was truly scary, and her alarmed reactions were often quite real and spontaneous as she tried to protect herself and Carrie Guffey. And this is the scene where the aliens are poking at her, trying to get to her son. Ray Bradbury declared this the greatest science fiction film ever made. Yeah, he's a hard science fiction writer. Of course he would love this movie. Tuba player Jim Self. Is that Self? Is that what I wrote? Tuba player Jim Self is a musical voice of the mothership in the climactic scene when the big ship comes down on Devil's Tower. Steven Spielberg and John Williams chose the tuba as the voice of the mothership because of the difficulty of playing the instrument, adding to a human characteristic to the aliens. Next up, Paul Schrader. Is that right? Schrader. I'm going to go with Schrader. Paul Schrader wrote the original script. When Steven Spielberg changed a great deal of it, Schrader decided to remove his credit. Since the film couldn't be left with no credit for writing, Spielberg claimed it for himself. Like, if you don't want it, if you don't eat it, I'll eat it. The actors had to spend a lot of time acting to objects and things that weren't there, and being told by Steven Spielberg that they were looking at and how to and being told by Steven Spielberg what they were looking at and how to react. For weeks, we were just sitting on a rock, shifting positions and pretending to look at a landing site and then the sky, Melinda Dillon said. It was a great acting exercise. Francois Truffaut, however, found it very difficult, finally giving himself over to nothing more than another object on the grand cartoon strip of 2,000 storyboard sketches Spielberg had shown him. When Richard Dreyfuss saw the final picture, he was upset with several moments of his performance, believing he would have reacted quite differently if he had seen the actual effects. And they're doing different things now with special effects where the actors can kind of see what they're supposed to be reacting to. And so to get the most out of the performance of the actors, they don't have to rely purely on the actors' imagination, because what the director sees and the actor sees in the imagination are totally different, right? Their headcanons are in two different places, even if you have drawings. But if you could make it more real for the actor, it really, really helps them out. And like I said, there's a lot more trivia. You want to look up some more, you can check out IMDb, but that's all I got for this show. So let's go over to see what the critics think. The critics gave it a 94%, and the audience gave it an 85% on Rotten Tomatoes. IMDb reviews gave it a 7.6 out of 10. A very highly praised movie. So I've separated this from the haters and the lovers. let us see what the haters say about this movie, Close Encounters of the Third Kind. Mike Macy from Gone with the Twins wrote, little more than a generic sci-fi episode constructed and designed with the enthusiasm and scope of something that is better suited for television. It should be noted that I think this was written in 2020. And so this dude is like jaded. It's like he has lost his sense of wonder, or he has lost his ability to give himself over to the film. Cause it's like now you've seen a whole bunch of stuff. So you're unable to imagine what it was like to see this film when it first came out. And I really think that he is mistaken. Let's say that. Let's just say that Mike Macy is mistaken. Next up is Martin Gardner. He writes for the New York Review of Books. He wrote, alas, beneath the visual hanky-panky stretches a thin, hackneyed plot that was done to death in the SF magazines and third-rate films of the 50s. I mean, they were done, yeah, but they weren't done well. You know, that is the difference. The thing is, you have to do it well. You have to create, like I said, over and over again, a sense of wonder. Next up is Betsy Bozdek from Real.com. I've left the haters. I'm coming over to the people who have some sense. She wrote, Steven Spielberg's awesome, in the literal sense, lyrical film about the first contact between humans and extraterrestrials is the kind of movie that gives you goosebumps. Yeah, that was the point. And finally, we have Neil Minow from Movie Mom. She wrote, a thrilling adventure story and a brilliant example of the art and craft of movie making. She hit the hammer on the nail. She hit the hammer on the nail. Why am I thinking she hit the nail on the hammer? She got it. She got it. That's what I'm trying to say. She got it. She understands. She gets it. She wrote what I was thinking. So, yeah, I am in wholehearted agreement with that. And I actually watched an ancient clip of a Siskel and Ebert show. And what's funny about this clip is that it was before they did their famous thumbs up. I didn't realize that there was a time that they didn't do a thumbs up and thumbs down. They just basically gave it a check mark. And while they liked the film, there were some things that they missed the mark on, because it's like I watched the full review. And I think one of the things they missed is that they were like, well, usually when you have a movie like this and they meet aliens, it all goes bad. It's like they're always fighting, or it's like it's a horror movie or something like that. And I think what it is that, especially Gene Siskel, he just doesn't like horror movies. So he's just delighted that he didn't get to see, that he wasn't watching a horror movie. But the thing about it is that this movie is not a horror movie. You shouldn't compare this movie to a horror movie or any movie or movies from different genres to each other. Like, they compared it to Star Wars, which was fair, but they shouldn't compare like a sci-fi. This is essentially a suspense movie, or you could call it an adventure movie, or a traveling movie, like a cross-country. It doesn't really do a bunch of cross-country traveling, but it's kind of like a movie of discovery. You can't compare that to a horror movie. That's the incorrect thing to do, I believe, as a critic. But I guess this was early in his career, and he's figured it out since he had figured it out before the end of his career, I'm guessing. So that is all I have for Close Encounters of the Third Time. It's an excellent movie. You can find Close Encounters of the Third Kind as of this recording on Showtime. Next week, we'll actually be talking about The Last Action Hero with special guest Archie Atkinson, co-host of Real Belief Podcast. For real this time. For real. One last time, if you like this show, then please help. Hold on a second. Oh, sorry about that. My throat cat got super dry. If you like this show, then please Help us grow. Tell your friends about it, tell your family, post it on social media. Let us share this wealth of enthusiasm and information about filmmaking. To do this, you can also rate us or write a review on Spotify, podchaser.com, and Apple Podcasts. 5-star rating would be much appreciated. And then you can also share this show with someone. I just said that. Anyways, don't forget that you can contact us at fanmail@backlookcinema.com. Believe me, it matters. Be safe. Share a movie with your family. Hug your loved ones. And be outstanding.